All right, there we go. Hello, everybody on Twitch. And yeah, sorry, I can't have my camera on Discord, Charles, just because my computer doesn't let me have it two places at once. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's fine.
And if you wouldn't mind saying something one more time, I just want to make sure I have your audio good.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Charles Show. I'm Charles. Gonna talk about
Perfect.
Charles.
That is absolutely perfect. All right. Hi, Crowboy. Always so fast. Thanks for coming in, everybody. Hopefully this new time works. It's working for people. All right, let's get started. Any questions before we start, Charles?
I don't think so. It seems pretty straightforward.
Yeah, it's nice that Discord lets us do this stuff. All right, let's get going. Hello, and welcome to Bonus Pod, the companion podcast to the Minmax Show. My name is Haley McLean, and I'm the community manager of this lovely community known as Minmax. On the Bonus Pod, we have a few different very fun legal topics today, but I want to introduce the person that's on right now, Charles Hart. Welcome, Charles.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. Charles is an associate editor over at Game Informer, formerly Fanbyte. I was listening to the episode you were on the Minmax Show only a few months ago, just this morning.
Formerly, they should make a parody of Suddenly Seymour from, gosh, what's that show called? The horror shop. Oh no, I'm messing up my intro. But instead of Suddenly Seymour, it's formerly Fanbyte.
Oh, perfect. It landed. You landed it. Don't worry.
Okay, good. I crashed the plane, but everyone lived, so it's fine.
And Charles, this is the first Minmax content you've been on since it was announced that you're actually part of Minmax now. Hey.
Yes, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. I've actually known for a little while you were going to be joining us, but we had to keep it hush-hush until the final announcement. For listeners who don't know, Charles is now part of the Minmax team, going to be working on video editing, behind-the-scenes stuff kind of thing.
Yes.
Awesome.
I like that you said like it was an embargoed detail.
Yeah.
I'm a closely kept secret.
Under NDA, lock and key. And I'm very excited to have Charles on because Charles has played... Have you played all of the Phoenix Wright games, Charles?
I think kind of, yes. I've played all the mainline entries. I played the Great Ace Attorney. There's some like spin-offs I haven't played.
Yeah.
But I've got a pretty comprehensive knowledge.
I love it. Okay, so I should have more experience with the Phoenix Wright series. So disclaimer, I'm a lawyer. I'm called to the bar. But I'm a transactional lawyer, so I sit in my pajamas at home and write documents. Like, I never see a courtroom. I spent $2,000 on a bunch of robes that they made me buy to get called to the bar that I will never use because I don't go to court. But I've always been, like, attracted to the Phoenix Wright series because I could live vicariously through Phoenix Wright and do litigation and be spunky and yell at the judge and stuff. So I was very intrigued. So when the first trilogy remaster came out, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago? I played a decent chunk of it, and I really loved it. And now that the newest trilogy release, which is so smart of them to be doing this, bringing everything to Switch, the Apollo Justice Trilogy has... Let me see here. I read your review this morning on Game Informer. People go check out Charles' review on Game Informer. But it was very helpful because I didn't even know really what games were bundled in. I kind of get a little lost with the Phoenix Wright games because they all are called Ace Attorney or something adjacent, so I don't know which one is which. But correct me if I'm wrong. The ones that are in this trilogy are Apollo Justice. Oh, I have so many Palworld notes. Apollo Justice, Ace Attorney, Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, Dual Destinies.
Correct.
And Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney, Spirit of Justice.
3 for 3.
So why is it the Apollo Justice trilogy if Phoenix Wright has the last 2 games? Because I've only started playing about a couple or so hours into in episode 1 of the first game.
Yeah, so it's weird because now that I've played all of them, I don't think it's an incorrect title. But as someone who hadn't played them, it was like if they were to make a trilogy of these, like what would they even call it? And then Apollo Justice Trilogy, I was like, okay, that makes sense, I guess. Apollo is playable in all 3 games. The first game, you're just him, and then in the second 2 games, it's like split between Phoenix, Apollo, and then this new attorney, Athena Sykes. And it's like by trial, you'll play as different characters.
Okay, so, and we should mention too that this takes place 7 years after the first Ace Attorney trilogy games, the first three. And
Yes.
I honestly didn't know who Apollo Justice was, so I thought it was just a spunky name because, like, the word justice, I just thought it was like gonna be his client was named Apollo or something, and I was like, I can't wait for Phoenix Wright to be in this game. And then
Oh.
when it was Apollo who was the young attorney, it was like his first case is how this game starts out. And I was like, oh, I kind of love this more because it's just kind of back to square one. Like that first game's first trial with the clock and the Thinker statue is so iconic. It was kind of, honestly, the first episode reminded me a little bit of just that first game in a lot of
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah. It's really like you can feel them kind of trying to reset. I think the game Apollo Justice Ace Attorney is weird only in hindsight because it feels like a soft reboot of sorts.
Mm.
And then for the fifth game, they decided to go back to Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney hyphen whatever game title it is.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I imagine they made Apollo Justice with like the intention of if you were going into this game, you hadn't played the other ones, you can do this for
Gotcha.
the first time, and because of that, it definitely feels like the OG.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on it, having played all three games now on the new trilogy remastered versions?
I like them all. I had played Apollo Justice before on my phone,
That's
because
crazy.
there's
They
like a
were on
mobile
mobile.
port.
Yeah. I forgot that.
Um, but I hadn't played Dual Destinies or Spirit of Justice, partially because I heard they sucked. Um,
Yeah.
they're definitely very different. The first Apollo Justice is like great. I think it's hard. I wouldn't say to someone that played the original three to not play Apollo Justice because it just feels like a natural continuation. Um, and then Dual Destinies, I thought was like not great at first. I don't really like the first two trials, but then it ends well. Every Ace Attorney game has like the sickest ending in the whole world.
So
um,
satisfying. Yeah.
and then Spirit of Justice is like one of my new favorites. I really, really liked that game.
Okay, just what the best trials out of the collection of the three?
It like takes you to this new country called Karain or Korain. There's like an apostrophe in there somewhere. And
Okay.
in the country, there's a law where if you are defending someone as a defense attorney, if they are found guilty, whatever punishment they get, the lawyer also has to take. So
What?
so nobody ever defends anything. And then Phoenix Wright comes in, he's like, I guess I'll defend this guy in a murder trial. And it's like, oh no, I hope he's innocent. Um
The way I
and
don't know if that's a real thing or not. Do you think that's a real thing anywhere in the world somewhere? I sure hope not.
you would know way better than I would.
I do not
I
know.
also hope not. It feels like some like medieval like court
Trial
like
by
the
combat, Game of
yeah.
Thrones nonsense.
Yes. Yes,
Hmm.
I was gonna say Game of Thrones. And then the other thing is that game has the royal family can do seances to see the last moments of someone's life. So then another
Okay.
element of the evidence in the trial is you like seeing like a first person video of the last thing they saw before they died. And I
Okay.
just think that like those two things add a lot like narratively and mechanically that make it just feel very fresh, and I enjoyed it a lot.
Cool. And something I think is really interesting that we were chatting about it right before this was the fact that I love these games, but they make me feel really stupid, but I kind of like that. Like just
Yeah.
oh, like, what's your experience with that?
So my take with these games, these are the probably the only games I have this feeling. I will cheat so hard. I have
Hmm.
no I have no respect for the puzzle solving process. I like for the whole duration I have this game open, I just have like a guide open in a tab on my phone that I'll go back to because I just don't like I like having to solve the problem. I don't want it solved for me, but also like losing just means I have to click through a bunch of text I already saw, and that's like
Yeah.
such an annoying penalty for me that I would just rather not engage with it at all.
Okay,
Um,
that makes me feel so much better because I literally was doing the exact same thing this weekend. I was playing through the first episode, went through a few times, got down to one life. So, people who don't know the Phoenix Wright
yes.
system, you have a little bar on the top right hand corner, and as you're doing cross examination of people up in front of the judge, You can press on certain things, and then the whole point is to try to find contradictions with the evidence you've been provided. So, say for example, someone will be like, "I asked for my hotel key at 9 o'clock and then blah blah blah, but you have evidence that says that they actually got their key at 10. You're supposed to say, objection, you blah blah blah, and that's the classic line, the objection, take that, all those amazing things. And if you mess up too much and you start accusing the wrong people or saying the wrong stuff, the bar goes down. And I won't lie, I've never had the bar go all the way down because I've panicked and just looked it up. So I don't actually know what happens if you mess up. Do you ever lose the trial, or is that kind of just,
So
it's a fail safe thing?
it's a lot more forgiving in these games, and I don't
Okay.
actually know if that is a thing that the trilogy did or if it is a thing that like these games specifically did. In the like original Phoenix Wright games, you would have to like start back from like the start of the trial or like the last checkpoint in the trial,
Okay.
and then you just have to click through everything again, and it was like really annoying. And this one, the judge just says, "Oh, I guess you were wrong. Well, you're guilty," and then it says guilty, and then you go back to
Interesting.
like the start of that cross examination.
Okay, so they do have a little bit of a punishment. It's not just like, you silly attorney, let's try that again, give up
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing. Okay, that makes sense. But I do like how these games make me feel so dumb, but I love that because there's it's almost kind of like Phoenix Wright Detective. When you really think about it, because I don't know, maybe this is it's satirizing the U.S. Court system, which is much more about arguing in front of a judge than discovery, presenting evidence, like doing all the necessary build up to it appropriately. Like there was a bunch of
Yeah.
times during the cases where they'd be like, "Here's some new evidence for the judge, the murder weapon," or something, and I'm like, you can't show that in the middle of the trial. Just yank it out of your pocket. There's so many things you have to do. Well, then again, I don't know too much about U.S. litigation, but I really liked how clever some of the little nuances to figuring things out were, and I would never have gotten some of them without looking at a guide, because not that they were impossible either, it's just that, and I don't want to spoil the first, even just the first trial that you do in the first one, the first Apollo Justice. There was some playing with color and stuff and thinking back to who might have thought the color was this when it was actually wrong, and you only have black and white photos, that kind of thing. And I just thought that was such an interesting and nuanced thing to have. I don't know. I was having so much fun with it. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, cool. Getting excited when you finally start to unravel things.
Yeah, I think they start with the premise and then work backwards from there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I really like it feel you can feel all the layers as you like break through them, like the thought process of making it, and I always really appreciated that.
Yeah.
And yeah, on the evidence thing, my favorite thing is when you get cornered. Phoenix is like, actually, I found this receipt in the victim's trash can, so I know he didn't do that.
Yeah.
Um,
And the
yeah,
judge is always so dopey. I love him. He'll just,
yeah.
the most obvious stuff will be happening, and you'll go, "But Your Honor, that couldn't have happened because blah." And he's like, "Wow, good point." Moving on. I'm like, what is this courtroom? But it's just that method, that model is so good. And I think a reason why we think of these games so fondly and think of them so long after they've come out, because these were all coming out on 3DS years and years ago, is they're so funny. These games are
They're so
genuinely
funny.
make me laugh out loud, and not just like in the when you blow air out your nose kind of way when you're by yourself. If you think, like, I'm actually going like, oh my god, that's really funny. And I think that's why they can get away with being so long, because I saw in your review it took 80 hours to beat all three.
Yeah, and also to be
That's so
clear, this
long.
was like we got they gave us a preview build, and then it was just the whole game, and I was only supposed to play the beginning.
Hmm.
And I don't even know if we had any plans to review this since it's just a collection of games that already existed. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna review this because it's the whole game, and no one's gonna be able to stop me from playing this all over the next month and a half. So it was a very like chill review process, like in my free time over a long period, which is how it should be played. But yeah, all three games was 80 hours, and I think
Wow.
the first game has 4 trials, and
Okay.
then the other 2 games have 5 trials and then a DLC trial.
Okay.
Um, so the first one's the quickest.
Okay, 80 hours. That's a lot, but I honestly could see myself investing in it and having it's a good. See, I'm playing it on Switch, And it's such a good bedtime. Do a little bit of a
Yes.
trial, do a little bit of reading. It's almost like you're reading a book. And they even have a mode, which I don't know if this one the older ones. Correct me if I'm wrong, where you can just kind of click it and it solves all the puzzles for you. So if you don't want to worry about, you know, you just want to read and like listen to the story, you can do that too. I personally don't. This is something you mentioned in your interview too. Is I don't think I'd ever tick that button because
Hmm.
it kind of feels like, I don't know. Part of the fun, even if I'm reading a guide, is being the one to click, hold it, take that
Yeah.
objection. Like that is Phoenix Wright to me. And even though I'm technically just looking up the answer, I could never give up clicking that button. It's like one of the most satisfying things in gaming.
Yeah, yeah. Even when I'm looking at a guide, I like make a guess in my head, and then I like check my work with the guide to be like, did I get it right? Oh, I got it wrong. Okay, then I'll click this instead. Like it doesn't feel like I'm doing zero work, even if I am using a crutch.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and the other thing about these games is even if you're not doing there's like a story mode that like auto plays the game for you, and then there's auto advance where you just don't have to mash the button every time.
Oh, that's nice.
um, and that's such a saving grace for me because I remember playing the older games and just like tapping my thumbnail on the bottom screen of the DS to get through all the dialogue over and over again,
Yeah.
and just being able to sit on the couch and just watch it is nice.
These seem like they would have been awesome 3DS games.
Mhm.
Like just the way that the game plays is lends itself well to a dual screen kind of way. It's fine on like I'm enjoying it fine on Switch, but it would be fun to have the evidence down below as you're looking up at the
Yeah,
person on the witness stand while you're. It's like you're looking down at your papers like a real lawyer in a courtroom kind of thing. So it's too bad that that can't really get translated over, but it looks great too. I was like, how did you find the switch up from the old style art kind of thing to more 3D models and stuff?
yeah. I mean the 3D models I thought look better in Spirit of Justice. There's one character, Trucy. She's like a little magician. She's in the Apollo Justice game.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um, her transition from 2D to 3D is rough.
Oh
um,
really?
rough enough that they changed her model pretty significantly between Dual Destinies and Spirit of Justice. So there's some characters where I'm like so used to seeing them, and then you see them in 3D and it like doesn't work. I think Phoenix himself makes a pretty good transition.
Yeah,
All the protagonists I think do a good one.
their spiky
I
hair.
want to say someone in the chat said, "Is there a text log that lets you review recent dialogue?" I'm a constant rereader. Yes, and that's
Yes.
like a saving grace, even if you're not on auto advance. Just the ability to like see a thing you mashed past is awesome.
Also, I just forget 90% of what anyone says, and then they'll come back and be like, "Think back. Who was it? Who do you think forgot to say this? Blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Oh crap, I don't know. And I can't remember anything." It honestly reminds me. I had to do moot courts in law school, which was essentially fake court. It's so young lawyers can practice their litigation skills and stuff. It was beneficial for people who were going to become litigators, aka not me. But it was still really fun. And what's so different about the Canadian legal system compared to the Americans, which is so apparent when I play these games, is we're so polite. It's everyone takes their turn. First the plaintiff and then the defendant and then the plaintiff again for the 2 minutes and then we swap and then it's very organized. And also in the Canadian system, you're supposed to call the other party your friend. So you'll say,
Oh,
my friend here, blah blah blah, and then you'll play Phoenix Wright, and it's like, you swine, you don't even know what the law is, and everyone's
there,
screaming
there's
at
a
each
lot of
other.
like physical assault between the prosecution often like hits you or throws
Yeah,
things at you. I love that. Yeah.
the prosecution will openly be like, I hate you, Phoenix Wright, you absolute travesty of a human being, or something akin to that. I'm like, this is on the record. How are they getting away with this and no one's in contempt or something? And another thing that I kind of had to get over was in Canada, we call our judges Justice. So we say Justice, their last name, or just Justice. So
Mm,
then I guess in America, it's always Your Honor, no matter
mhm.
what. So the fact that Apollo's last name is Justice, the judge kept being like, Justice, what do you have to
Ah.
say? And I kept being like, why is he talking to himself? And I was like, oh no, it's Justice Apollo Justice. So such a Canadian playing Phoenix Wright. I'm the only one who'd have this problem, but it literally kept tripping me up. I'm like, the judge is so dumb. He keeps asking himself questions. I'm like, oh wait, no, he's talking to me, and then I'd have to answer what he
He
said.
would though. Like it's it's
Yeah, that's
also
true.
totally in character in
Yeah.
your defense. Yeah.
But I have a special place in my heart for these games. I think when I boil everything down, it's just that the writing's so good. It's super funny. I could
Mhm.
replay these years and years later, I think, because they genuinely make me laugh. And some of the twists are very, not just good twists, but also hilarious twists that you're like, how is that even possible? Oh my gosh, I love these. I brought it down because I didn't want to get up during this, but I have a little Phoenix Wright statue. I don't know if you're watching on Twitch too, Charles, but
I am.
I ordered this, and he sits on top of my law books. So my very top of my things behind me is all my very boring, very expensive law books that are collecting dust because law books go. As soon as it's 1 year past the year you took law school, they're useless again. But he sits there and he guards them, and he wasn't too expensive. He was on Amazon. So check him out. But he came with a
He's
little sleeve.
great.
He came with a little sleeve on his arm to protect his pointing arm. I was like, thank you, seller, for knowing his most important asset. Is there any other thoughts about Phoenix Wright before we move on to another slightly legal topic?
I like you call it slightly legal as if we're doing something that's
Slightly
not
legal?
okay.
Slightly
Um
illegal?
uh yeah, I think overall great stuff. I would say if you haven't played an Ace Attorney game, I wouldn't recommend this as a starting point just because the
Mm.
other games are so accessible. So I would say the Phoenix Wright trilogy holds up super good. That game's awesome. If you want something that's like a little more modern, the Great Ace Attorney is about like Phoenix Wright's ancestor moving from Japan to England, and
Ooh.
that's on the Switch. That's surprisingly good. I remember starting that one and being kind of apprehensive about it because it was so different, but
Yeah.
it really rocks. Um, and yes, good stuff. Good game. I gave it 8.5. Game
8.5.
Informer recommends.
Great. That's a good score. I agree with that score. I would, as far as I've played it so far, but that first trial alone, if I were to rate the first trial, that's about where I'd have it. Oh,
Yeah.
exciting. So I need to get better at segues. Ben is so good at segues. I need to get better. But speaking of lawyers, let's look over at Palworld. Charles, have you seen all this Palworld stuff? People talking about, like, what's your experience with this game before I
I've seen the
describe it?
discourse.
The
We've also
discourse.
done like previews for it at Game Informer, and it's always been a thing that was like kind of on my radar, but never something I gave that much thought to. I was like, oh, that'll happen when it comes out, and like
Yeah.
did not expect it to. I mean, I don't think anyone expected it to do what it's doing.
I actually was listening to the last Game Informer show, and I don't know who was it that did the last. It might have been Brian Shea, but the person on the episode was saying, "Yeah, I remember I was interviewing the studio head, and I said, 'Do you know people think your game isn't real?' And hoping that the studio head would chuckle and be like, aren't memes funny?" But he was like, "What do you mean? Like it did not read like a goof or anything." And then the person had to be like, "Oh, haha, just like." This game looks very odd. People aren't used to whatever. It did not read like at all, so they had to move on, which I thought was super funny because, yeah, I remember thinking about this game, Palworld, was it a year ago? It was shown off in some direct or some show, and it was just Pokemon with guns. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
truly did not know whether it was real or not. It seemed like the kind of thing that you'd find on Discord as a reaction gif, like Pikachu with a AK-47 when you're mad, or I did not and I forgot about it. And then this last week, Palworld came out, and it's sold an absolutely insane amount of copies. Someone in our Discord in the get a load of this channel, it's like 1.3 million copies sold, more than that, and over a
Oh,
million concurrent players on Steam. It's breaking records.
I think it's 5 million.
5 million
Yeah.
copies sold, and it has a lot of discourse popping up around it just because I think it's such an interesting spot with this is Scarlet and Violet was so cruddy looking, and then this comes out which has somewhat decent visuals and also Pokemon looking monsters, and suddenly there's tons of people who either A are upset that it looks like plagiarism it looks like perhaps AI generative assets. We don't know that for sure, but perhaps. And then alternatively, other people are saying, "Heck yeah, more of this! Let's get Nintendo on its haunches and make them nervous that they have to give us a better experience than Scarlet and Violet." Because I just played the Teal Mask a week or so ago. Sunny D, I see her in the chat here. I was playing it. I've heard that the second one is better. The Teal Mask one, it was running so poorly. There was times where I was talking to people in quote unquote cutscenes and they weren't there. There was one, and it's also just kind of lazy design. I was talking to a grandpa, and then I stopped talking to him, and then the mission said, "Talk to grandpa again." And I had to walk 2 feet and just hit A again. And I was like, why wouldn't you just have the conversation keep going? What in what world, magical world full of little monsters is this fun where I just talk to a grandpa over and over? Just hilarious. But I was really intrigued by I saw a lot of people trying to do like legal analysis on this game, trying to determine if if Nintendo could potentially sue them for copyright infringement. And yeah, I just find it really interesting. I think just because the last game was still sold amazingly, but looked so low quality that I think this conversation really compounded upon itself upon Palworld's release. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, that was like really early. That was like a month after I started at Game Informer. I got like an early code for the new Pokemon game, and I played every Pokemon game, so I was so excited. And then I started playing it, and I was like, "Oh no!" I think like on Route 1, my first Pokeball I threw, like the camera clipped into the ground, and I was like, "Hopefully that won't happen again," and it just kept happening.
Yeah,
but I do like I understand. I don't know. I don't have like the ill will some people have towards Game Freak, but I understand where it comes from.
yeah.
Like why people would be so frustrated. And so to see that combined with this Palworld stuff is really interesting. Have you seen like there's like a few threads of the side by side stuff?
Yes.
Like do you see I know some people are looking at it and they're like, I don't know, it's two dogs and they're both like, you know, magical creatures, or do you think they look similar enough that it's like problematic?
Yeah, it's so tough because disclaimer again, I'm a IP lawyer, but none of this is advice. Not that I don't think Game Freak would come on and take my advice on these assessments, or alternatively Palworld. But yeah, so I have a lot of experience considering what a judge might consider fair use, because so there's a fair use test. It's not just vibes. You know, you don't just put the duck Pokemon next to another duck and say, the vibe ain't it, and then it's copyright infringement. There's actually a whole set of steps. It's a 4-factor test that you have to go through to assess whether something is infringing or not. Well, not so much infringing or not, but if you find an infringement, then if it is fair use, aka the person can continue using it. So fair use, though, is a defense to copyright, not an exception. So that's really critical, because an exception essentially means you could get away with doing it and just kind of say, oh, it's my exception, I'm not even infringing the copyright. But fair use has you attest that the copyright was infringed, but I'm allowed to do it because of this defense. You'd have to go to court and figure all this out. So it's very subjective, and sometimes people even say that it kind of comes down to the judge judging it. I remember there's a really funny case with the Garbage Pail Kids when they came up against the Cabbage Patch Kids. Most legal scholars were saying that should be fair use because of a parody, right? They were making fun of the original work, blah, blah, blah. But the judge really didn't like it, so he said it was an infringement. So it's all these legal steps, but that is to say you could go to court and it could go either way depending on the judge's analysis of all the factor tests against the two works to see if they're too similar or not. And I don't know. So like I wrote down the fair use test. So for example, there's one that looked just like Luxray. It's like the lion Pokemon, if people don't know what I'm talking about. So Luxray was on one side, I saw in that thread, and then the other Pokemon that's theirs, I don't even know its name, probably liony or so, who cares? So if we were just to take those two and just say, Judge, there's an infringement here. Let's move forward. Like they're nearly identical. I think those two were the most egregious. Was the Luxray one,
Mhm.
in my personal opinion. So the judge would have to look at it, and the first step is the purpose and character of the use. So is Palworld putting new meaning to a lion Pokemon? Is there some new spin, new depth? And that's kind of where parody comes into it. Like Spaceballs took Star
Right.
Wars, but then had its own meaning. It was like satirical and humorful and did all this. It had a new meaning to the original work. Is there any value added? Or is it just copying it? Is like the first step. So you can already see how that could go 12 million different ways. Like one person could argue yes, one person could argue no, based on a whole bunch of different factors. And then the nature of the copyrighted work is step 2. So that's more to do that one's really good with like journalism stuff. So if you were copying facts from someone, that's usually okay because, facts are facts. It's not someone's creative work that they're putting on. Maybe they arrange the facts in a certain way to look pleasing in a journalistic article, but I could then write about the same facts and it's not copyright infringement if XYZ, I put my own spin on it. That's really not applicable here because it's not like duck Pokemon is a public fact or anything. It's
Pikachu is a fact, and you gotta deal with it.
Fat Pikachu is best Pikachu. That's a fact. And then step 3, amount and sustainability of the portion taken. So if you're only taking a little bit, then maybe it's not too bad. There was one Pokemon I looked at that had what's the little frog from, he kind of looks like a tadpole. He's one of the starters, water.
Sobble.
Sobble. So one Pokemon just straight up had Sobble's head antenna, but everything else looked different. And that one had me thinking about the third factor is like, okay, even if they did rip that asset and put it on this guy's head, is that a substantial part? If we were just looking at the Sobble comparison with that dude, and like maybe not, right? Because he's his own guy, but they're still taking assets. There's also the Meowth eyes, like the dark version of Meowth. His eyes and mouth was directly on another Pokemon. Do you think that's a substantial part of Meowth to the point that, I mean, a lot of people immediately saw it and was like, that's Meowth's face, right? So maybe.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And then the final step is the effect on the market. So affecting the income of Nintendo would probably be the biggest thought there. Are they going to have less sales because of this thing?
So I have a question about that third one.
Yeah.
So you were saying like the how substantial it is. So let's say in Palworld, like just theoretically, each of them took one like fin-like object from a Pokemon that was on there. It's like someone has Pikachu's tail, someone has Charmander's arm, someone has Squirtle's shell or something.
Yeah.
Do you is it individual like to that? Like, are we comparing the games and saying like this is the amount that's similar, or are we comparing like in that instance like Luxray versus named but unknown Golden Lion?
It's funny because their gameplay is so different. So Palworld is like Ark survival with monsters, I think, than Pokemon with guns. People were always calling it Pokemon with guns, but when you actually play it, I was playing it a bit last night. It's just survival game, and like the little pals, the Pokemons, could be replaced with a robot. Like they don't really matter. It's just collecting them, and then you put them to work in your little camps, and they do labor for you all day. It's kind of like depressing, honestly. When I was playing it, I was like, this isn't the spirit of collecting monsters I've come to learn. But I think to your question, to me it would probably be easier to tackle it from a asset via asset perspective. So if Nintendo were to take issue with this, they would probably compile, like that Twitter thread we saw, all of the assets that are substantially similar to some of their assets. And then the other angle that I was really intrigued from this was people saying it looked AI generative. So, and we don't know this for sure. There's absolutely nothing online that says that they've used AI to make any of these monsters. It's just, how we're all getting really good at knowing just by looking. You know what I mean? Like when you see an AI picture, your gut just kind of goes, I know.
Yeah,
a
yeah.
human didn't
it's
make
weird.
that. Yeah.
They did, this company has made an AI game where I think
Yes.
part of that's coming from,
Yeah.
but it is weird that, like, it's, like, the spirit of AI feels like what it's taking of it's, like, it's similar in these, like, sometimes very specific ways, but, like, often in, like, uh, I don't know how AI works, but it feels like it takes the essence of,
Other
anime girl holding
people's.
sword, and you're like, that seems like,
Yes.
what it would look like. There's a good example of one of these it's like a bird archer that looks a lot like Decidueye,
Yeah, I saw that one. Yeah.
and it's like the colors are similar, but it doesn't really have the stuff of like specific elements taken. That one's very interesting to me because that's the one that most looks like I want to make
Most.
Decidueye but different, as opposed to like that
Hmm.
Meowth one where it looks like they took Meowth's face and put it on like Skitty's body.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what I'm interested in is I could potentially see a world where just based on my own looking of them at my own brain that they took Pokemon, put them in an AI generator backend like as a database and then said make me X, and then it was using that as inspiration to make their Pokemon, hence why we see such similar assets popping up in some
Mm,
of them, whereas some other ones look a bit more crafted. Like there's like a Emperor Penguin styled one that kind of looked like, I forget that Emperor Penguin, the Piplup evolution. Do you know it?
Empoleon.
Empoleon.
This
It
I'm
was.
taking this like a quiz of my Pokemon
I
knowledge. I
need
just
you
want you to know.
every time I do Pokemon. I'll discussions. I'll bring you on. I'll just be like, Charles, what's that one? You can answer it for me.
Politoed. Sorry.
So it was that, but it was a unique spin on him. It was still an Emperor Penguin style one, but it was more like a Napoleon general soldier, whereas
Mhm.
Napoleon is like, I guess it's also is kind of playing on the word Napoleon, but now that I think about it, but he looked different. They looked substantially different, but similar idea. So I was like, okay, I
Yeah.
feel like that one's a bit more crafted and it has a bit more originality to it. Whereas some other ones kind of just look like Meowth's face on it on Skitty, like exactly like you said.
Mhm.
And I was looking into there's not a lot of copyright AI case law, but there is more. And I was reading a case that just came out last year, and it was kind of the perfect case to think about with this. So let's pretend not in a perfect world. That sounds like I want this to be a thing. Let's pretend we're in a world where they reveal that they did that and they took Nintendo assets, put them into an AI generator, made their own mons, maybe twisted a couple of them. Let's see, whatever. So there's actually arguments in case law that AI can never have copyright ownership of its work because it needs to have a human needs to make something in order for it to be copyrightable.
Mm.
Which seems like the most basic thought ever, right? Like, of course, that's the whole point of creativity is the human being is making something. But there is this case that I was reading from last year, and it was the most perfect little case study. It was Thaler and Perlmutter. Great names. But Perlmutter is actually the registrar of copyrights. So it's not like a person; it's like the copyright office,
Mm.
more of it. So this dude named Thaler made an AI system that spit out a really pretty picture, and then he wanted to copyright that. So he went to the copyright office and he said, this is mine because I own the machine that made it, and it's like a works for hire, which is an employer term, which means like if I'm an
Mm.
employee, I do my work for hire and everything's owned by my employer. So he was trying to
Mhm.
argue almost that the AI machine was his employee, and since he owned the employee, whatever it makes is automatically his copyright. So yeah,
Huh.
the courts ate him to bits. They're like, "What are you talking about?" Um, Copyright has to have human creativity because that's kind of the whole point. And what I thought was really funny with that case, though, was they were going about it the most complicated way of being like, "No, we read the Copyright Act, like there's pronouns here, so it means that humans were thought of." And I was like, "Can we just make a law that says no AI?" You know what I mean? Like, why are we trying to
Yeah.
argue posthumously that AI shouldn't count? It's like just say humans only, done. because
Yeah.
because there's so many funny cases after that they were referencing in that case that I love to bring up. I brought them before, but there was one time where a monkey took a selfie, and then
Oh.
PETA was saying that the monkey owned the IP in the photo, and they lost because a human didn't make it. Like it needed the human authorship thing. And then there
Uh-huh.
was another case where someone was hearing voices in their head, and then they wrote down what the voices were telling them, and then they were trying to say the copyright should go to the voice in their head, not themselves.
Whoa.
I know. And also like people who said the angels were visiting them and telling them to write stuff down. There's other cases like that. And they actually ended up getting copyright in the works, but only because the judge said, well, you had to edit all those, even if let's pretend that the voice did tell you these things, right? Like they didn't even discuss whether or not it was true, whether they heard voices. It was still, it was still, you edited it together, so therefore you did some original creative work in compiling it into a thing, so therefore it's your IP. So they kind of got off the hook with not saying you're crazy. That didn't happen. But yeah, so all these case laws are now starting to point towards the fact that AI can't own copyright. So let's pretend that an AI system spit out that Meowth-looking skitty thing. They don't own the copyright to that based on that precedent. So it wouldn't be protected. So then you or I or anyone else could start putting the Meowth skitty on anything we wanted. Like they couldn't come after us essentially for its creation.
I see.
Yeah. So it's like an interesting thought experiment too. If they did do that, not only could they get in trouble with Nintendo, they also don't even own it to begin with.
Right.
Because
Wait, so then Nintendo, if we can do whatever we want with it, what ownership does Nintendo have over it? Would they just say that like that's clearly our like designs that have been smashed together?
Yeah, see, this is where there's kind of no precedent, but the way that I envision that kind of conversation going is they would take issue with the fact that their IP was being used in an AI system to begin with. So no matter what no matter what it's spit out at the end of the day, they wouldn't want them using their art assets for this commercial purpose, which would be auto-creating new monsters, probably would be how they try to argue it. But then the interesting thought there is if they do tweak it a little, say if it spat out the Empoleon looking one and it looked too much like Empoleon, and then they took the time to kind of add a little flair to it, change it a little bit, like then it might have its own originality, but you'd have to do it on a case-by-case basis for every monster to make sure it was still fair use. And like it's just like the most it's just the most convoluted weird thing happening. And I'm hearing a lot of people talk about it in a legal way, and like I heard one person on TikTok, they were like, oh, it's just parody of Pokemon, so they're allowed to do it. I was like, you think Palworld's a parody of Pokemon? No, it's not. What commentary are they providing on the Pokemon? It's just the most interesting thing to me, and I'm very intrigued by it.
Yeah, I think. Well, and then the other thing that's so interesting about it to me is there's a lot of games like Palworld in the sense of it's like takes the idea of Pokemon but X, and I don't feel like looking at most of those I get the like, AI generated, they're just ripping Pokemon off feel, even though sometimes it's like, okay, that's a fire lizard. But like, I don't know. It's different in a way I don't have the words to explain.
Yeah, it hits different, and maybe it's because it's been so weirdly successful right off the bat. We're talking about it so much because there was other similar Pokemon games. But yes, no, Mr. Hipshot's pointing out that like even like old Dragon Quest drawings were clearly inspiration for some of the original Pokemon designs. But there's still originality there. Like someone took the concept of a little monster in a shell and said, I'm going to do it like this, and drew their own drawing, and then Sheldon came about, right? Like that's so different than someone taking a part of this Pokemon, slapping it here. Like there was one that looked just like the fire starter from Sun and Moon, the bunny, the final evolution. I need you again,
Score
Charles.
Bunny, but long.
Long Score Bunny, yeah. I can't remember either, but it was like really, it was just Cinderace. Thank you, Sunny D. It was just like really egregious. It was this design just green with a few small changes. So there, it wouldn't even be an argument of originality, whether it has IP or not. Like, if something spatted out AI generated, it would be, is it just copying Pokemon, which it could, depending. But yeah, it would have to be like an asset via asset thing because nothing else about the game is similar. Remember when Genshin Impact came out and everyone was doing side-by-side comparisons of animations and being like, this is just Breath of the Wild?
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see that go to core because that's more of like the core mechanics of gameplay being similar rather than just JPEGs or models that could easily be like they could swap out the Cinderace looking guy and put in another different looking bunny if they wanted
Mhm.
and still have the game up. But for games where the core stuff is such a copy of another game, it'd be a much more complicated thing.
Yeah, I never thought about that. I was gonna say also, uh, so like Nintendo's legal claim here would be you can't use our stuff to make this, assuming there was an AI thing.
Yeah.
You can't use our stuff to fuel this AI generator. Is there precedent for that as like a like have people been able to say you can't use my stuff in your AI model, or is that I was under the impression that we hadn't for anyone that wants to keep their stuff out of ChatGPT or Midjourney or whatever, that we hadn't got that victory yet. Um,
That
what is the deal
victory.
there?
Yeah, that's what I don't know. So actually, Neil, one of our mods, was sharing a class action with me about. There was a few different artists who are doing a class action lawsuit against an AI generative art database thing because a lot of appeal of certain artists is they have a unique style.
Mhm.
So it's not so much someone copying a one for one of their drawings. It's more that the AI was learning how they draw and then spitting out drawings that looked like they had drawn them. So it's interesting. It's kind of like the more unique your art style is, the more there might be an argument that there's copyright
Mm.
infringement, even if it's not a one for one copy, because
Mhm.
it comes down to that, like the substantial portion argument, the third factor test on the fair use thing is even though is the substantial portion the stylization of it, and it also helps if you're a more recognizable artist. So Jackson Pollock, for example,
Mhm.
he can't copyright. That's a bad example because anyone could splatter paint and copyright it. What's a better example? Who has like a really unique art style? Can't think of any artist. Isn't that bad? I can't. Someone who
We could
has.
do like Van Gogh. He's got a pretty distinct like brushwork
Yeah.
style. He's dead, but if he was around,
Yeah, or yeah, Sunny D says Andy Warhol. Yeah, like that. So if someone was to take a can of not the whatever soup, it was a Campbell's, another brand, and do a very similar art print, like could you argue that that's copyright infringement even though the assets are different? Potentially, because the stylization is so similar and that's what's unique about the work. That's kind of why it's so complicated. It's so much case law around this. It's like when people say, I always laugh when I'm watching YouTube and someone posts, "This is fair use" at the start of their video. I'm like, you don't know that. You got to go to court and figure that out. Like, you could try. But yeah, it's yeah. Any more thoughts on Palworld? And maybe we can open up to. I know some people have their hands up. They might want to chat about this too before we open it up to them.
uh, no, I find it interesting how fired up people are getting about it. Is
Yeah,
my I think the I think the legal discussion is very interesting. I was excited to talk to you about it because I was like, someone knows what they're talking about. But a lot of people like angrily saying one thing or the other is interesting to me because again, like I've known about this game for months and didn't have any particular feelings about it,
yeah.
and now it's like a hot button topic, and I just think the like where that's coming from is fascinating.
Yeah, I'm so surprised by just the numbers, how much this game
Yeah,
is selling because I was playing it and I truly think that we are just so starved for a well-running open world game with little monsters running around.
yeah.
I think if we lived in a world where like Scarlet and Violet was really grounded and all the systems worked well and the art style looked good and it didn't look like a Wii game from 2007, that we might not have put as much attention on Palworld, but here we are, and that's just kind of the world we've crafted for ourselves. But
The words "we game" from 2007 took like 2 seconds for me to process. Do you think? Uh, uh, I think I have an answer to this. Do you think this affects Game Freak at all? Like, do you think they look and they're like, oh, what if we were making good games,
yeah,
or polished games, and then they like, do you see them doing anything?
I have no idea whether they'll care about this or not. Like, even if this were to go to court, would they win? Who knows? Because that's kind of the whole point. Is these discussions are so subjective that kind of where I started out with this conversation is like it sometimes even depends on the judge who's considering your issue. They can apply
Hmm.
the facts in and go through the test just like any other judge, but they might not like the garbage pail kids and have a personal affront to it. Who knows? But yeah, no, that's a interesting question. I think Nintendo is historically very litigious, of course. We saw them get very upset about all the moddings going on in their games and stuff and taking all that down, suing that guy who ironically had the last name Bowser for 30% of his income for the rest of his life because of all the game
Still
console
wild.
ROMs. Yeah, and you know, they like to make an example of people. I think they like
Mhm.
to make examples in the court system. That's exactly what the Bowser thing was for me. I thought because I read through those cases. So Bowser got charged criminally and went to jail, but that was for piracy, not for, you know, there's like other crimes related to him selling things on the market that aren't his besides just copyright infringement. So he went to jail for that. He was there for 7 months, but I think what his downfall was in his when he was that case, he said, I think that people who infringe copyright should just get fined, not go to jail, because he didn't want to go to jail. And then Nintendo probably read that and popped champagne and said, let's get him. And said, you yourself said you should get fined. Therefore, you know, I think it was just one of those situations where this dude showed up, did something he shouldn't have, said the wrong thing. And they're like, let's make a really good precedent that people can't steal our stuff. And just like it all jumped on that guy.
Mhm.
Could I see them doing it again with this? Maybe. But it's hard because it's not just about whether they'd be right or wrong. It's like optics. And I think the
Yeah.
optics about the fact that are they doing this just because this game looks better than Scarlet and Violet might also not be the greatest. It's an interesting question, and I couldn't even begin to think whether they actually do anything about this or not. Because the other thing we don't know is did they use AI or not? Because we have absolutely no idea if they did. If they somehow learned that, maybe they're more inclined to do that because it would stop other companies from using AI to copy their stuff too. It would be like a bigger fish than just
Mhm.
taking down somebody who's copied some of their art style. But who's to say that ever comes to light or if that even was a thing? But it's a good question.
Yeah.
All right, well that was fun. I love talking about Pokemon and Lost stuff. Bob Buell, let's bring you up here, buddy. And just the way, Charles, it works, we can just bring people up just like we did with you. Hi, Bob.
Objection!
Nice.
I heard
Oh,
you
hold
frantically
on.
click when I yanked you up here as fast as
My
you
mic
could.
is a little too sensitive to pick up on the clicking of the soundboard.
How are you, buddy? What did you want to talk about?
Oh, I'm doing good, doing good. Loving the bonus pod. Gotta
Thank
get the
you.
term right. Yeah, really, really fun. This whole Palworld stuff. This is so interesting to me. I feel like I'm perfectly in the middle, just staring at the two sides of the fence, screaming at each other, going like, I'm just ready to see this happen. I have no dog in this fight whatsoever. I have not played it, but I find it so fascinating.
Yeah,
So I
me
guess
too.
my question kind of is, if there is action taken, which is so funny that all this is hinging on like, what's Nintendo gonna do? Are they actually gonna, or what's Game Freak gonna do? Like if they do actually take action,
Mm-hmm.
does it matter from a legal standpoint whether they used AI or not? Because like
Mm.
that's kind of what I find interesting is like, are they going to have to go to court and prove whether they did or didn't use it at some point in the design process? Or can they just say like, no, there's only so many ways to draw a face on a cute looking dog
Cat.
creature,
Yeah.
and we just happen to draw it like that, you know? Like
Yeah.
people are like, oh, that has the same face as a Snorlax. And it's like, yeah, Snorlax is 3, parenthesis signs. Like that's
Yeah.
all that is.
Yeah, no,
um
I get what you mean. Yeah, I think there's always more than one way you could go after a company who steals your stuff, right? It doesn't have to just be copyright infringement. Ta-da! Like they could be going after them for a mirage of things, but it would kind of come down to whether they want to go after them for the fact that the monsters are so similar looking. Like pretend they didn't use AI. Like could they argue some of those monsters are too similar looking to Pokemon, and now that company is financially benefiting from the fact that they spent the last 30 whatever years building up the brand of these monsters to have some kind of value proposed onto them when you see them? Are they copying that art style and then making money off of it very quickly, as we can see, based on that kind of a simulation with people saying, this looks good because I'm used to seeing stuff like this. Like that might be their argument, and then they are entitled to the damages of like lost revenues, whatever, damage to the brand. So you could argue it that way and say it could just be a fair use assessment. Did they infringe copyright? If so, do they have any fair use in having those monsters look that way? And then I think what the really unique thing could be is if say the studio head came out and was like, oh, we used AI, LOL, it was so fun. Like he just says that. Who knows? And it's just like, that's what it is. That could be a really unique space to try to argue, like kind of like those class action lawsuits I was talking before that Neil, one of our mods, was sharing with me. It's like, where's the legality in using AI as like almost like a copyright infringement machine, like plugging in other people's stuff with the intention of creating stuff that looks substantially similar? Is that itself a copyright infringement act to input things into a database system to then copy? I think that's a really unique and interesting conversation that probably I don't know. I haven't looked into it if the courts have ever talked about something like that. I'm curious to look into that class action. I haven't read it that Neil shared, but I would imagine artists really don't want their stuff getting plugged to the back end of this stuff, because all it's going to do is someone could type in, draw me this in the art style of artist name. And instead of the artist getting all the money, all the hard work they've done, accumulating their style over the last however years, becoming popular and people liking their stuff, some machine can just go, here's a bear drawn exactly like how she would do it. And that person just lost out on the money that they could have gotten. So it's almost like AI is like a copyright machine, just copyright infringement machine. So yeah, it's interesting. It would kind of be like two separate things. They probably would say, we don't like the fact that you're using our materials into an AI machine, and also, even if that wasn't happening, the results are also infringement because XYZ, and stop using our stuff.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Kind of take down one tier and then moved on to the next tier after that.
Yeah, because that's exactly how those factums read, is like, point 1, they did this. Point 2, then this happened. And then at the very end, it'll be like, what we want. For the first thing, this. For the second thing, this. And then they just like list everything like that. Doug Bowser stuff, I read his things. I think they were charging with 9 different counts. Like, it wasn't just copyright. It was like all these other things he did, and they just rattle it down. It's like, and then for the damages for this, and then they list everything they want just for that one count. Because say if he gets charged for just 1 out of the 8, they still want to detail what they get if he just gets charged for that. Or best case scenario for Nintendo, if he gets charged with all 9 things, what do they get if everything happens? That kind of thing. So it's a lot.
So it's like proving to a jury that like Galarian Meowth exists is so funny to me.
Oh man, discovery for these cases is so fun to look at, especially the Fortnite ones. Like, I was reading one where they were trying to argue that someone was cheating in Fortnite, and it was like, Your Honor, the skin doesn't even have like they were trying to argue that just because you can't quite see the angle of the way this gun shoots doesn't mean blah, 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 cheating was occurring. And they were trying to prove the cheating happened.
Your Honor, I was 360 no-scoping him like crazy.
I'm just that good.
When I wear the banana skin, I'm just bonkers at Fortnite, Your Honor. It's like, case closed.
The defendant is a noob. What can I say?
Oh my God. No, good question.
This is
Bob.
Great.
Any other thoughts before we move on?
No, I love so many other hands up. I want to hear that from them too. So
sounds good.
I will cede the floor.
Thank you, Bob.
But you guys are killing it. Great job.
Thanks, buddy. Bye.
Bye.
Leafeon, I saw your hand up for quite a while. Let's bring you up there. Hi, Leafeon.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. A lot of talk about Palworld today.
With a name like Leafeon, are you Team Pokemon?
I was gonna say I heard there was a Palworld version of you called Leafy Dog the Pizza Cat.
You know, I was kind of flattered. There's a few different pals inspired by Leafeon.
Oh, really?
Like a couple things taken here and there. Like the Cinderace, grass version of Cinderace.
Yeah.
Like the ears are pretty much Leafeon, and there's like a couple other little details sprinkled throughout other Pokemon, and that's kind of how it is for almost every Pokemon. Like the Leaf Monk one, that's not at first glance there is a screenshot that makes them look like Leafeons, but if you actually look at it, it's more like, oh, this is a Pachirisu. Like it's just a green chipmunk. It's a squirrel or a chipmunk. But Yeah,
They're
there's
Frankenstein horror combinations sometimes.
they
like,
are.
those,
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, my whole past 4 days at this point has just been filled with Palworld because on Friday, my friends all got it and started playing it, and I was like, I'm not gonna buy it. I'll play it on Game Pass. And then found out that uh, the Steam version is the only one that supports private servers, and Game Pass
Oh.
and Xbox only support direct four-player co-op. So
Oh.
meanwhile, this whole other server that I'm in of 10 people are playing in this one big map, and I'm on my own. So then they eventually got me to just buy the game outright and play with them, and then I ended up putting in about 30 hours this weekend into the game.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah. So, and then this morning I wake up and have a bunch of conversations the entire day about this game. So, it's been a lot.
What are your
But yeah,
conversations been like? What are people? What are you more inclined to talk about with this game? Because you're enjoying it, which I'm kind of like. I mean, Ark survival gameplay is fun, even if it didn't have little monsters in it, right? Like I like survival games, so I think this game is fun if you like took all the controversy out of it. But it's weird that such a controversy is surrounding it so quickly.
yeah, it's really strange that there's so much controversy around this one. I think it's really just because of the numbers that it's doing.
Yeah.
Like Temtem, is something that was a few years ago, and I feel like there would have been the same argument, but maybe not as much because Palworld does have a lot more similar creature designs.
Yeah.
You know, like the variety of quote unquote inspiration that Palworld has taken from Pokemon is just so broad. Like you have the Galarian Meowth example with the eyes and the mouth that are just taken directly textures.
Yeah.
And then there's the one like I think it's called Azerobe in Palworld that is a mix of Superior and from Pokemon and Primarina.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
right, it's got the hair from Primarina and it's just a blue version of Superior. And then on Twitter, somebody had posted a bunch of videos of comparing the models each other, ripped from both games right next to each other, and even overlaying them and meshing them back and forth to see the difference between the two. And it's strange because some of them are exactly the same shape and the same look, like the Sabelfin you mentioned earlier, right?
Yeah.
But the topography is completely different. So there's questions, like you were saying before, of just visual style theft, and then also ripping the models directly from the game. And it seems like they either did one or the other.
Yeah.
Which is just so weird to me. Like, so I was the Primarina Superior one, right? The topography is also very, very different. But they're exactly the same shape, and clearly the idea is there stylistically.
Yeah.
So it's so weird to do, like to just dive into on what is actually, infringing on copyright.
Yeah, and
Technically speaking, right?
I think it's fair for people who don't even know the law but just feel morally like this feels icky. Like that's super a fair feeling too. If you especially people that grow up loving these Pokemon. I mean, I remember when for my 5th birthday I got Pokemon Blue and I was like freaked out. And I've played every game since for hundreds of hours. Is like even if you see this and you're just kind of like, yeah, it's Nintendo. It's a massive corporate conglomerate. Like these are my little buddies. This guy just has my little buddy's face on it. That feels a little weird. Like that's also a fair thing to feel too, I think.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
But,
and then like with the AI art question, that's also kind of weird when you dive into it, especially with the developer's history and their stance that they've said on it, and also like their past AI art inspired game. Well, game uses AI art, but with this, they definitely did not. I'm going to say that almost like 99% did not
Interesting.
use AI models in this game, directly assets in this game. Because they started development pretty early in like 2020, 2021, which was still way before the AI art craze, right? That's only in the past couple years.
Yeah.
Like maybe this past year, really, right? Um, and it's just to completely there's so much work that goes into having that work in a game, especially with all the systems that they have, with all the different uh tasks that the pals can do in the game, catching them, placing them around in the world. There are so many things that went into this game, into just having one pal go into it, rigging them, animating them, than just ripping the assets straight from the store. Like there's a lot of different pieces than just the style is there. So
What a-
it's
what? Oh,
yeah.
sorry. I was just gonna say. What about if it's more of like a concept art machine? Like they use it to make the concept art for the Pokemon based on Pokemon input into the back end of a database and just make the 3D models from there. Do you think that's
Honestly,
possible?
I hate the idea of it,
Yeah.
but that's more of like an opinion
Oh,
that
it's a
can't really
complete
have
guess. I'm
ground on it,
I'm
right?
guessing 1,000%. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
totally.
if I say that, like, hey, I went to go see a Shakespeare play and it gave me a bunch of ideas, well, that's public domain. Let's say, hey, I saw Pokemon and wanted to make a Pokemon-like game.
Yeah.
That's kind of the same thing of, hey, I went to a museum and saw this piece of art. I want to also become an artist, and I, make a bunch of art in that vein, right? Like in chibi art style. Like
Yeah.
having AI art as concept art is different, I would
Hmm.
say, than actually using it in the game. Like you can see things as inspiration, the same idea of just seeing the Pokemon straight out, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to like say that, hey, you guys used AI art as inspiration, as concepts for a game, so you should be punished for that. Like it's right. It's hard to actually get a conclusion on that kind of idea.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's just so interesting that this has been the thing that has made us all have this conversation because there's been so many other like I've played other like think of Digimon like back when we were kids is like Digimon came out it's like oh it's just I remember being little and people were like it's copying Pokemon I'm like no it's not it's freaking Digimon they're so different all of them the art style is totally different whatever but yeah it's just I think it's interesting what you're saying about the fact that I just think it's so funny to be like, that's Sobble's head. That's that's his face. Oh, those are the legs of him. Like it's just I'm so intrigued by if they just it's like when someone traces art but changes it a little and you can tell a little bit and
Hmm.
it's not fair for me to make I'm like talking about the law of it while also completely guessing what happened with how these things were made. But I would love a peek into the back end of their system to see how they make their art assets because is it just
Yeah.
how much of this is we love Pokemon, we want to make something like it, and then how much of this is we like Pokemon, we want to make money like Pokemon people,
Yeah.
Like I
Mm.
think
I
that might be the question.
Yeah.
I've been thinking just during this conversation, like, okay, that's Sobble's fin. If they didn't, if there's no AI and they didn't copy it, how did that happen? why? Why does like what is the? I'm trying to think of like what the other explanation is. Like, if you didn't copy Superior for this art, that's amazing because it looks like Superior.
Yeah.
Um, like, what is the? I don't know. I don't know what defense it is other than like we just didn't do that, which I guess is, if they didn't, they didn't. But
Yeah.
it's
I
confusing.
guess their last line of defense would just be pleading guilty, but also claiming parody. Like,
Yeah.
because I mean, there is a claim that they could roundabout do for parody. Like how PETA had their Pokemon parody game about, you know, animal labor and labor in general, right? So they could be saying something with that. But
Yeah, I think parody might be tough here though, because there's no real, I mean, with the PETA thing, their commentary was what got added via the parody. Like, they didn't like what Pokemon was doing by showing adorable little creatures being sent out to fight to the death. They, like, morally opposed that. So when they made that
Yeah.
game, the parody was, isn't Pokemon awful? And then they satirized it and parodied it, and that's like how. Whereas I think the meaning here isn't. I don't think they're commentating on what Pokemon is really, or even trying to reference it all that much because they want to distance themselves from it, probably. But it's just like, we have a game that's like Pokemon, and you play with your little guys and send them to work and whatever. Like, I don't really see where the parody thing would line up, because there's no real value added in, if it is found that they copied the monsters and now they're on their haunches trying to defend themselves. What value was added? It's just their own take on their own gameplay, which, the gameplay is very different, so that we can't even really argue there. It's just really the assets, just the animal assets. How similar are those? Is there really any value added in them inserting those arguably similar assets into their much different game? It's probably just, we think it'd be cool if it looked like Pokemon's, I think might be the only real angle you could think about it, because what would they be satirizing?
yeah, I mean, I completely agree with that. Like, it's just using the Pokemon style to do that. But getting later on in the game and having, like, I don't know, around 20 pals in your base working and stuff,
Yeah.
and actually managing that, it was kind of funny to a point where you see in the corner, it's like, hey, I can't think of a specific name, but a leaf monk, right? Your leaf monk is getting very stressed, or your leaf monk is slacking off, or
Yeah.
your leaf monk is stress eating because it is overworked. Like that, those are literally like notifications that happen.
Yeah.
And if the pals are not in good enough working conditions, they will be less efficient. So the game encourages you to have better working conditions and to not overwork your pals, which it could be, the satire there of just like, having these cute little creatures stress eating and getting depressed and fighting each other because they have horrible work conditions.
Better unionize Pokemon. That's the parody.
Yeah.
The Pokemon should unionize. And take
Snorlax
Pokemon
wouldn't
should
sleep
unionize.
all the time if he had reasonable work hours.
We
Exactly,
Deserve,
yeah.
We deserve EI for battling. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a fun.
Yeah,
way to
and there's
do it.
also, and someone just mentioned in the Twitch chat, there's factions in the game of like devout humans that also, catch pals and also are against pals. There's a free pal alliance in the game that fights you and does not want, pals to be caught. And, it's basically N from Pokemon Black and White.
Yeah.
They want the pals to have their own free will kind of idea. So there's superficial and surface level commentary. It's there, but
Yeah. I think that might just be plot, though. It's not really commentating on Ash has unfair working environment for Pikachu. It's just like, it'd be kind of fun in this world if there was people who opposed this and they inserted it, maybe.
Yeah.
I love that, though, that they should. I'm still thinking of that. They're all unionizing and hate working in their little factories we're crafting for them. Thanks so
We need
much.
a Pokemon game where they finally get full consciousness and can
Class
communicate.
consciousness Pokemon.
Class consciousness Pokemon. The Pokemon unionize themselves against the humans.
That'd be the first good open world Pokemon. You could just be the Pokemon living free again.
That would be great.
Thank you, Leafeon.
All right.
Was there anything else you were thinking
Thanks for
of
having
chatting
me.
about? All good?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about Palworld a lot because it's definitely a really fascinating conversation right now.
It is. It is fascinating. Well, thanks for chatting with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Hazard.
Bye.
Goodbye. We have a few more people to chat with, and we're already over, so we have to be a little bit quick if that's okay. Sorry to shorten people. Hazard, how are you?
Hey, hi, Haley. Hey, Charles. How you doing?
Good. Were
Awesome.
Were you also want to chat about Palworld or a different concept, different topic?
A little bit of Palworld. I mean, one thing. I think it's blowing up a little bit in schools. I think that's one of the maybe big things about Palworld that's sort of driving a lot of the sales and engagement is that I don't know how, considering you can like butcher these animals and stuff, but like apparently it's like rated 7 or something like that. Like it's
Oh.
quite, you know, a bit E for everyone. So
Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure on that and how that all works, but apparently it's pretty low in terms of age rating.
So you think a lot of kids
but-
are buying it?
Yeah, at least asking their parents for it, playing it with them, and all that kind of stuff. So I can see why it's Pokemon with guns, and so you can sort of understand how that is attractive to young people, especially with Fortnite now, and how they're sort of already sort of exposed to, you know, weaponry and all that kind of stuff. It's not probably not seen as big a deal
That
as
is
it might have been
interesting.
done.
That was like a thing growing up. I never thought about, like, my mom like wouldn't want me to play Call of Duty when I was a kid because it's like, that's guns. Like, you know, 11, you shouldn't have guns. I don't know. But Fortnite has made it so like cartoony.
Yeah. No, as long as there's no blood, right? It's like fair game,
Yeah.
and they can pretty much market it however they want. Yeah.
It also really is like a middle school kid's like dream come true. What if a Pokemon had a gun?
I mean, I feel like I've seen 10 million memes about that.
Yeah.
It's like hilarious. Yeah, good point. I think you're right. I think kids, it's just Pokemon plus Fortnite, so of course that's going to make money. Absolutely.
But, one thing I wanted to just touch on was it made me laugh earlier when you said, "Oh, we're starting to sort of develop a sixth sense for AI art
yeah.
in stuff." Because I don't know if you saw, it might not have done, but 2K revealed the cover art and things and the sort of concepts for the WWE 2K24 game that's coming this year.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of a controversy where someone tweeted and basically said, or posted an X, I should say, saying, "Hey, I think this like artwork has been AI generated because Hulk Hogan is there and John Cena's T-shirt looks weird and Stone Cold Steve Austin is missing fingers." And a lot of people sort of grabbed onto that and started being like, "Oh, this is an outrage. How can you should have paid an artist first and all that kind of stuff."
Yeah.
And then I think 7 hours ago, Jonathan Bartlett, who is a very, very prolific artist, basically said, "Hey, I made this. I spent 6 months making it. It's
Oh,
definitely
no.
not AI generated."
Oh no, I was gonna say the AI always messes up with the fingers. I bet it is AI. That I would never come out and say that if I was the artist behind it and everyone thought it was AI. I'd probably keep that to myself. Bold.
That's devastating too. Like to be like, man, this guy, whatever this computer is, it messed up these hands so much. It's
This
like,
is
it's
clearly AI. Look at the shoddy craftsmanship.
just
They're
really
like,
hard.
It's me. It's like, oh, that's too
A lot of their like other clients and stuff were just sort of come out and say, "No, I know the person that made this. They're really good."
Oh no. Well, kind of similar to that topic. I saw Nicki Minaj had a bunch of art come out that was AI generated, and people were pointing out, you should have paid an artist. And instead of being like, "Oops," she doubled down and was being like, "Screw you guys, I don't care," which is like, what? Come on, Nicki, don't, it was, and it's the hands. Like, hands were missing fingers, hands didn't have fingernails, and people were like, "What? This looks cruddy." Like, there was one hand that was holding up something, and it just straight up had 4 fingers. It's like, how did that go past a million humans and not get caught? It's just, it's weird. It's not even like, okay, pretend you don't, you have no moral qualms with AI taking the jobs of other people. The art looks bad. That looks cruddy. Like, hello. Yeah. You have to at least admit that.
I just feel like over the next 12 months, we're going to have a lot of that art looks bad and it's going to actually be made by an actual person.
Oh, that's my worst nightmare. Oh, God. That's like when you're like, "How long are you?" to a woman you think is pregnant. They're like, "I'm not pregnant." You're like, oh, God. That's like the artist's equivalent to, "Oh, this art looks really bad. I bet it was AI. That's mine." Oh, no. Just never ask. Never ask, just think in your head.
But yeah, like Leafeon, I've just been sort of, and Barb have just been sort of watching this. I cannot wait to see it unfurl over the next week or so.
I know.
See if there's any improvements. But yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Before you leave, Hazard, can you say controversy one more time?
Controversy.
Oh, no, you said it a different way in a very cool way.
Oh, controversy.
Controversy. Love it. That's the best way to say that word. 10 out of 10. Thank you.
No worries. Cheers. Thanks. Bye.
See ya. Oh, isn't that just the best word you ever heard? All right,
It's a thing where I like, you hear a different pronunciation of the word, and I'm like, I'm not going to say something. I'm going to pretend I've always said it that way. and
people
let it happen.
people in Europe say words better. That's just it's true.
Yeah.
All right, Sunny D, let's get you up here. Hi, Sunny D.
I gotta click accept. Hi, hello.
Hello. Sorry to yank you up so quick.
No, you're fine. No, it surprised me. Yeah, I know you guys have a lot of time. I had to be in and out of this conversation, but
yeah.
the few things I wanted to say about Palworld. One, there's definitely blatant ripoffs. Everybody said that, right? And I'm curious if the solution is just going to be you got to take them out of your game. I'm curious once people get more and more into that game, if some of the like moves that the I don't know what they're called, pals.
They're
use,
pals, yeah.
If they're gonna be infringed. I saw the Penguin use Dragon Meteor, and it's just Draco Meteor. It's like the same exact animation from the main game. And I'm curious as people get farther and farther, if there's going to be more of that, it's going to be revealed. Because you brought up, that Empoleon, and that was one that I saw as well, where it's like, same idea, right, but done in a different way.
Yeah.
I saw the instance with Slowbro, right? Slowbro is a yokai, right? And there's 4 different ways Slowbro's been presented, right, across different mediums. Like,
yeah,
I'm trying to remember, like whatever, right? And they're all different, right? But not that Superior or that Cinderace one where they're just that's just one for one.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I haven't seen anybody also talk about how late you guys like the mechanics of leveling up are interesting and how late you get the guns in the game, which is kind of weird to say.
Yeah.
But,
I just have a stick.
For how much? Yeah, you have a stick, and then it's like a bow and arrow. And it's not like to level like 20 until you get like a handgun. This sounds weird, being like I want guns faster, but there's much advertising about shooting these monsters, right, and having your creatures have rocket launches, right? I would expect it to be more early in the game.
Yeah. Why can't I use handguns on the little chickens right away? I'm pissed off.
And
yeah.
You're kind of saying that if you were to amend this game in one way, your first amendment would be get rid of the blatant ripoffs, and your second amendment would be everyone should get guns faster.
More guns.
Give people more guns. That's what we need to make Palworld great. No, I just thought that was interesting, right? I haven't been able to play it just because it's like I'm not really into Arc survival games, but I'm a huge Pokemon fan, so it's been interesting to see the discourse between the two. And I loved you guys talking about this as well, right? This is something I'm super curious to hear. Your take as an IP lawyer, especially. The last point we could probably talk about next week. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the story of the Pokemon DLC, because it's kind of weird. It gets really dark, and it continues kind of the same, I feel like, vibe from Scarlet and Violet. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts more next week. But yeah, I just wanted to say my piece real quick, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
No, thanks for coming up. I haven't heard people talk about the animation copying. I haven't seen even a whiff of that, so that's interesting. And I think you're right. I think it's like layers, and the more people play, it'll be like, wait a second, this is just Swiftstar or whatever. Because people play it more. I beat the Teal Mask, and I haven't started. I just started the Blueberry Academy second one. I forget what it's called.
Blueberry Academy. You're right.
It's just called Blueberry Academy. Oh,
Indigo Disc is the second.
Oh, Indigo Disc.
Yeah. I know Blueberry Academy is. I remember the name being.
It should be
silly,
Blueberry
but
Academy.
No, Indigo just.
That sounds way better.
Blueberry Academy.
But I gotta say, Teal Mask didn't quite hit for me. I didn't love the story, but my friend Kyle was saying that the second one's much better, and I think I remember you saying that as well, didn't you?
Yeah, I think the second one's much better from gameplay perspective, from story perspective. Having all the battles be double battles, I think, is a really fun concept.
Cool. Yeah, that's smart.
Yeah, it makes you really have to think differently in terms of how you battle. I had to redo my teams because I was like, well, this isn't going to win, so I had to. It was more team building than in the previous DLC and the base game itself. But yeah, I'm super curious to hear more of your thoughts. But I know I don't know if anybody else has their hands up, and I know we're over. So
yeah,
I want to
a couple more peeps. We'll talk about it next week, though. I'll play more of the Blueberry Academy, the correct name.
Cool. All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Sunny D. See ya.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, Tanner and Backlog Busters. I see y'all. You'll be our final ones. Hi, Tanner.
Hey there. Is my audio all right?
Yeah, you sound good.
Oh, great. Okay. I actually wanted to join to ask Ben, which he's not here this week, about a comment he made, which is that he had just played his first visual novel ever, which like shook me a little. But I will get him on that next week. But kind of on a related note, I would ask you guys a couple questions. One, do you consider Ace Attorney a visual novel actually? And two, for Charles, what are your top 3 games in the series? Because for me, number 1 is Great Ace
Ooh.
Attorney. I think that just blows out the characters and setting and everything of the series before it. But I want to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, Charles, you want to handle those?
So whether it's a visual novel, so I there's long portions of it that are a visual novel, I think, but it's hard because you have the like I think the investigation stuff that's between trials doesn't feel like there's more interactivity than normal. But I also haven't like played a lot of visual novels outside of this, which is usually I think this is as low interactivity I would probably go. Um, but yeah, that's a good question. I often am like looking for more games like this because I don't think a visual novel would scratch the same itch. I specifically want that like solving, like make me feel like a genius. um, and then my favorite games in this series, my go-to, I really liked Trials and Tribulations, which is Ace Attorney 3. I really liked the Great Ace Attorney. My only issue with the Great Ace Attorney games, and it's not even really in like a fair criticism, I think some people would say, it's a collection of 2 games, and those 2 games took me like 75 hours to play.
Wow.
But it feels like one game. So it feels like one really, really long game that has like a little dip in the middle that you can pause if you want. But it's not like a significant enough dip for me that it feels like a different game, even though it originally was released as 2 games. So for me, I really liked that game, but it felt like some of the stuff it just took forever to get to, because they would like lay down a hint in like the second trial of game 1 and it would come back up 60 hours later somewhere. So that was like one, kind of gripe I had with that is I just had to sit on it for a while. But there's a plot point they introduce at the end of Apollo Justice Ace Attorney, and it like never really gets addressed in that whole trilogy. So
oh, really?
I won't spoil it because you're probably gonna play that game, but it's really funny how much like the end credits of that game are like, and this is gonna be a big deal, so get ready for it. And then like no one talks about it. It's mentioned like once or twice.
Oh, weird.
Anyways, I'm gonna say Trials and Tribulations number 1, Greatest Attorney collection. I'm gonna say collectively number 2, and then I think I'd put Spirit of Justice at number 3 because I really had a good time with that.
Nice.
That's awesome about Spirit of Justice. I really need to play that one.
I recommend it.
Yeah. It's kind of funny that it seems like Ace Attorney fell for the same trap that Yakuza did in a way, which is that they try to introduce this new protagonist and then kind of double back to the old guy at some point.
Like we like the old guy, yeah.
But Fred in the chat said that Danganronpa is the recommendation for sure if you wanted to try something similar.
Okay.
Yeah, I should. It's also one of those things of like it's such a big commitment. Like, do I want to get into all those? But I think I do. I just played an 80-hour Ace Attorney collection. I don't really have excuses to not
those
try.
Those are big hours. I played Persona 5 for like 100 hours. You're getting close to a Persona 5 length game. That's crazy.
Oh yeah.
Well, thanks, Tanner. Is there anything else you wanted to chat about?
Nope. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
I'll catch Ben next week.
Sounds good. See ya. All right. Backlog Busters. Back half of the show. Last talker. How's it going?
Hi. How are y'all doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. And yeah, Charles, congrats on the new position posting. I don't know what the official term for it is.
Yeah, I'm video editor. Ben said I could choose my title. And there was a minute there where I was like, oh, should I make it fun? Should I be like video czar or something
video
like
guy.
that?
Yeah.
But I just went with video editor. But thank you.
Okay, sure. Just the plain name. I get it. Yeah, I guess it's been really interesting hearing all this because I feel like my first impression of Palworld was this feels icky. Like it feels like a lot of these things, even if they aren't any AI, anything
Yeah.
involved in it, they seem like uncanny valley close to Pokemon.
Mhm.
But it's been interesting hearing everyone talk about the things that it does that's interesting, maybe the reasons of its success. My question that I'm still still weirded out by and still confused by is like, is this what people wanted from Pokemon? Because I always Pokemon's my like yearly or bi-yearly, like it's my nostalgic thing I go into that just feel good, and I kind of like I don't know. I don't expect much from it, which is maybe a low bar. I loved like the changes Arceus made, and in theory, I like the things in Scarlet and Violet if it had performed better.
Yeah.
But it always felt like what I've heard about Dragon Quest. That Dragon Quest is like very similar game to game, but it's like a nostalgic thing. But then seeing Palworld and everyone talk about like, oh, they enjoy the crafting systems, and like catching humans is maybe a thing, and building these factories and like all
Wait,
and
you
having
can
the guns.
catch humans?
You can
Yeah, I
catch
saw
humans.
some clip
What?
of that you can catch a human in it. But I'm just so confused because like that is like I understand going open world with Pokemon is like an interesting, cool idea, and I like that in Arceus, but I
Yeah.
am so confused about the amount of people that are like, this is the Pokemon I always wanted, because it's so opposite of anything I ever would have thought of or considered. So like, am I the outlier here that just I want my turn-based things and maybe a tiny bit of interaction outside of it? Like, I don't know. How do y'all feel about that, about the differences here, and like this being like, oh, this is what I always wanted from Pokemon?
Yeah, Charles, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, I think it's really funny that someone would say that this is what I wanted. I honestly think the Pokemon fan base is just so starved for like a
They're
good
parched.
creative take
Yes.
that it's like I don't even think this is that similar to Pokemon, but it's like got enough loose parts that they're like, I'll take it, I'll run with it. I think like Legends Arceus
Sure.
in a vacuum is probably not as great of a game as I feel like it is. Like I know people that have played it that weren't like huge Pokemon fans are like, meh. But playing it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is revolutionary. This is beautiful. Just because it's not a thing Game Freak really does is really try to break the mold like that. So I feel like that's mainly where it comes from, if I had to guess. But I am with you. I was never really interested in this game, and now I'm kind of like, I guess I should play it for work, but not like not like a thing I'm excited about.
Yeah, I think I totally agree. I think I always thought the argument was I want Breath of the Wild with Pokemon, and then you can do turn-based stuff. Like
Right.
a world as grounded and material and solid and not glitchy as Breath of the Wild, but just Pokemon are there, and you can, and like
Yeah.
still the same game mechanics as Scarlet and Violet. I think you still would throw balls at them. You could bring one out and have it walk beside you. You still walk up to people and do turn-based battles out in the open world. I always just thought we just wanted it to work and look good and not
Right.
glitch into existence. And when a Pokemon is only 20 feet away, it has 2 frame rate and the water looks like it's copy pasted repeat over and over. I thought that's all we wanted. So it's interesting to I say the royal we as gamers. So yeah, I think it's interesting to hear that this is what some people have been dying for. Not to hate on their tastes. Like I like survival games. I play them all the time. It's just, I think that this is not what would be the perfect Pokemon for me. No, it wouldn't. I don't want to send my Pikachu to work and build things for me or garden or whatever. I would like him to be my buddy and we go on the classic Pokemon adventure. They're straying from tropes to improve it. And then there's some tropes that's like, that's why we like it. Like we should keep it that way.
Right.
So I think that Arc survival games are really fun. I don't think that's my ideal Pokemon gameplay format is survival. Probably not.
Yeah.
Some people might want that though. Not to hate on
I
them.
feel like I've seen the odd amount of comments that are like, finally this company did what Nintendo's like too afraid to do, and I'm like, I'm also afraid of this.
Yeah,
This is where they took my Pokemon.
I think that's just a byproduct of that frustration that people feel with
Sure.
We're talking about the most successful franchise of all time. Like I'm not
Yeah.
even being hyperbolic or anything. This Pokemon makes more money than any other franchise in human history. there's no reason why the games can't run well and look good. There's absolutely no argument to be made. I'm sorry, you can't make it. Hire more people so people don't have to crunch. I'm not saying crunch all the devs so they can't even do anything. I'm saying you have the funds. There's no argument. So I think the frustration in just spending in Canada, I spent like $110 on one of the games with taxes and everything because our dollar's crud. I have to spend $100+ to play a Pokemon game, and it doesn't work. Like, it genuinely looks like it was made 20 years ago. It's frustrating. So I see that frustration coming out, and then anything that's even kind of Pokemon, it's like, yeah, like what Charles was saying, starved, absolutely starved. And it's like, oh my god, I can run around and things don't glitch into existence. Like, the bar is in hell, the bar is in the floor. Anything we can get, we want for that. And that's probably why people are enjoying it so much, is just that negative connotation with the last entry. Someone else, I forget who mentioned it, but wondering if this is going to make them kind of work harder for the next entry. I'm curious if they're going to prioritize the next entry in the series, if they're going to go back to a more linear Sword and Shield, Sun and Moon, whatever have you kind of format, or if they're going to try again open world and really bust it out and make everything function properly. It just feels lazy a lot of times when I'm playing those games, and I play it because it's Pokemon, and I feel like I'm reaching a point where I can't. My brain is like, you can't spend another $100 because you like Eevee. Like, it has to also be a good game. Enough. That's enough of that.
You said there's no excuse, and I'm like, I agree, but also for them there is an excuse. It's that they keep breaking the record for most games sold in a weekend.
And I bought it.
Their new.
I bought it. And I played it. I played the whole thing. I shiny hunted. I did it because it's Pokemon, And I've been trained since 5 years old to love these things. So I don't know. I think Pokemon is one of the funniest IPs because they could truly commit sins, and I would be like, next game, please. Like, I just love those little guys so much. But now, where this feels like the very first time people are like, oh, watch out, Game Freak, look at the, like, that's been the discussion around it. So it's been interesting to see that. I know what you mean. Like, this is what we've wanted. I'm like, no, it's not, but I get the sentiment. You just want better quality graphics and stuff.
It's making it sound like Pokemon has given us all Stockholm syndrome or something. Like, they were like, well, we can't leave, but yeah, it's cool to see something else that runs well. I did have one quick question for Charles though. Yeah. What do you think the chances are that we get the Ace Attorney versus Phoenix Wright game ported to Switch with all other Ace Attorney things on Switch now, right? Like, that's the last thing I can think of, and it's so expensive on 3DS, and I would love to get a copy.
I am curious. I want to look. I don't know who owns Professor Layton. I think that's
5, or is that just like the publisher?
Yeah, Tanner says level 5, maybe.
I think that's the only barrier, right? Is like when it's a collaboration game like that, you've gotta. It's not just one company deciding we're gonna bring our stuff back out. It's like a conversation now.
Yeah.
I think they should. I think it would do well. I think I've been looking into Professor Layton's stuff of like, I played it when I was like truly 7 and dumb and couldn't get past anything because I didn't know the answers to any puzzles because I was 7. And I want to play them again. So I could totally see Professor Layton. I know there's like a new one coming out, but I could see them doing a remastered collection a la the Ace Attorney stuff. And I think it makes perfect sense. But I think that's the main barrier. I think we're more likely to get the Ace Attorney investigation games next, just as long as they're remastering all their old stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And I did see, like, I think the first couple Professor Layton games are on iOS and Android that got a slight remaster, but they never went anywhere else. But yeah, I'd love a collection of all those. And if you are wanting to feel stupid and 7 again, you can play the first game, because that's how I felt when I played it like last year. Some of those puzzles were so hard that I was like, you know what, I need to go practice math some more, because I'm really struggling on these.
I have a vivid memory of there's one of those, and it's the question was like, you're in a room, you have a match, you're in a room with a stove, a fireplace, and a candle. What do you light first? And I circled the stove and the fireplace and the candle like hundreds of times, being like, maybe I'm just not circling it well enough. And then eventually figured out you have to light the match first. And then
Oh yeah.
like, I remember that, and it was like truly like, I don't know, 10 years ago. What? No,
That's
more than 10 years
diabolical.
ago.
That's evil.
I feel like half the puzzles in there are that they give you that feeling at the end of them that it's
Yeah.
like, oh well, I never would have thought that. That's stupid. That's like the opposite of where you led me down. But
Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
all right,
thanks so
well,
much for coming
thanks
up.
for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for
That's
being
all.
the last person of the day.
See y'all. Thanks.
See ya. All right. That was great. Oh my God, we went 40 minutes over. Sorry to take up your afternoon, Charles, but thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me.
Yeah, it was fun. I was really excited to hear your Palworld expertise, and you did not disappoint.
Thank you. Maybe I'll do a bit of tidy up there. Just saying again, none of that was legal advice, you little guys. That was just informational purposes only. But yeah.
I also want to say you have consistently, and I don't know if this was purposeful, you've consistently used little guys as the like game agnostic term for Pokemon-esque creatures, and I
Did I really?
appreciated that as a definition of like, you got your little guys, and this little guy doesn't look like that little guy.
The way I did that and didn't even realize. You know, in my brain, even Whalmer's a little guy. They're all little guys. It's not about size. It's about
absolutely right. Palkia's a little guy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Little guys. Well, yeah, for those, this is only our second episode of Bonus Pod, but for those of new, just again, this is our weekly, it's a companion show to the Minmax show. So it's every Monday at 4 p.m. Central Time. We go live in our Discord where our patrons at the Minmax Council tier can come on, our lovely patrons here, and chat with us live in the second half of the show. And then all the $5 supporters on Patreon as well, the backstage tier, also get this right into their audio feeds on their favorite podcast app as well. So if you support Minmax in any way, really, you'll be able to help this show and then be able to get it in different ways. So yeah, thanks so much for tuning in again. My name is Haley McLean. I'm the community manager, and I had a ton of time chatting about all this, lots of legal stuff. We got Apollo and Palworld possible infringement. But thank you so much again, Charles, for coming on and chatting with me. Anything to plug besides your Apollo Justice review, of course, which I encourage people to go read.
Yeah, I just reviewed Apollo Justice. You can hear that on Game Informer. I also last week finished. I've been spending the last few weeks editing. We did a rapid fire interview with the director of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Oh,
very happy with how that came out.
Nice.
So yeah, that's on YouTube.
Amazing. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for listening. This was a fantastic episode, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Goodbye. And that was so Ben can edit it well. People on Twitch, let's send you somewhere fun. You always kind of have to end it and then also end it again because it gets edited. All right, who's live right now? Let's see. Kyle Bosman is live. He's always live. He's playing Super Mario Brothers 2. Love it. Let's start a raid and send y'all over there. Are you going to play Palworld now, do you think, Charles?
Well, I'm interested in it. I don't have Game Pass currently.
Oh, fair.
And I don't want to buy it. We're trying to get codes at Game Informer, but we haven't gotten any yet because they're understandably overwhelmed right now.
Fair.
But yes, I will probably check it out. I also like Pokemon. I don't know.
Yeah.
You were talking about the DLC, and I was like, I should probably play that.
Yeah.
I like it.
Bye, people on Twitch. I'm raiding them over to... Sorry.